Hey guys, you may remember a few years ago that the popular marker brand Letraset actually got taken over by a company called Winsor&Newton, and I thought I'd make a little comparison video so that you can see kind of the changes that happened when that takeover took place. So the first thing, when Winsor&Newton took over, they didn't really change the Pro marker range of markers at all. They kept all the colours, they even kept the style of the pens. The only thing that changed was they added this black label, which is kind of completely black, which I personally am not really a fan of the black label. This is obviously a black pen. On the other colours you get like a coloured strip that runs down the side, but it's kind of, I'm not a big fan of having a completely black label on the pen, but really they're completely the same. So if you were using the old Letraset Pro markers, the new Winsor&Newton ones are identical pretty much in every single way. What did happen when the takeover took place is originally Letraset had a brand of markers called Flexmarkers, and they had a very large colour range of 148 colours. And when the takeover happened, Winsor&Newton did away completely with the Flexmarkers. Instead, they brought out their own brand of marker called the Brushmarker. So I kind of bought this set just to do kind of a comparison to see, are they the same as the Flexmarkers? Are they different? What got changed? The most notable thing that got changed was they dumped about half the colour range, so you can only get 72 brush markers now, as opposed to the original 148 that you could get of the Flexmarkers. What was also a shame was they actually dumped a lot of the Flexmarker exclusive colours as well. So to be honest, I found that quite a shame, because a lot of the colours that got dumped were colours that I was quite fond of. So just in comparison, this set of 6, you can get a kind of a set of 6 brush markers for around £10.50 off the internet. The old Flexmarker set of 6, I think they were slightly more expensive. This set has a sticker price of it of £15.99. However, I do remember that you could get them for, at the time, you could get them for like £12-13, something like that, if you looked around on the internet. Sometimes they were even less than that. It was a bit hit and miss, but roughly the new brush markers are cheaper than the original Letraset Flexmarkers. They did completely change the packaging. That was the first thing I noticed when I thought I'd try out these new brush markers. And I know it's going to be stupid to complain about packaging, since most people kind of rip them out of the boxes and then you're done with them. But I actually found that this new packaging is so difficult to open. I don't know what it is, but when I've opened these a few times now, so it's kind of softened up the plastic, but it's still kind of, you've got to force your way into it. And then trying to pop these markers out of the plastic the first couple of times was really tricky, because they were really kind of cemented in. So I know it's not kind of a massive thing, but compared to like the old style of packaging, I never had any kind of trouble getting the pens out of the old packaging, whereas these ones, I was like, I can't get them out. It was that kind of irritated me. Also, I kind of feel that this kind of packaging takes up more space, just because they've got the 6 pens all lined up like this, as opposed to kind of this double stacking technique that they had in the old packaging. And they used to have this old packaging for the Pro markers as well, when they were the Letraset brand. So that's kind of my feelings on just like the packaging. I did a kind of little comparison thing of the colours. So on the left, these are all the colours that came with the new Winsor&Newton brush markers, and these are the old Letraset Flexmarker colours. So the interesting thing, well, the main interesting thing I noticed was with the blush. Now, I'm not sure if my camera will pick it up, but there is a noticeable difference in the colours, which is very odd, I thought, since they've kind of continued over all the original colours. Why have the colours changed slightly? So the new one, it has a slightly more yellowy tinge to it compared to the old one, which was much more pinky. And it's the same with the almond as well. The new one's much darker compared to the old one. The dusky pink is much darker compared to the old Flexmarker Letraset version, which was again a lot more pink. These colours seem to be a lot more dull than like the original versions. What I kind of thought was interesting was they changed the name of this marker. It's now called Praline, I believe, and the original colour, the closest comparison I could find was the Cappuccino. So I thought that was very interesting that they would change the name of one marker when they've kept all the other marker colours, they've kept the original name. So why change this one colour? Because it looks identical colour-wise, the old one and the new one, so why change the name? It seems really odd to me. But yeah, as you can see again with the saddle brown and the burnt sienna, they're pretty similar. I'd say there was maybe a tiny difference, but barely even that, to be honest. Like the new one's maybe slightly darker, but it's not really showing up on camera. But yeah, I'd say these three colours are identical, but these skin tones, they've somehow changed the skin tone slightly, which is slightly odd to me. That was like the first thing I noticed, and I kind of went, I don't like that, because you kind of get attached to a certain shade of colour, even if it's just a tiny difference. That's still, to me, the blush one is quite a noticeable difference, just because of the yellow versus the pink tone in it. So anyway, that was kind of the main interesting thing that I noticed. Also, the next thing the main thing I actually noticed the first time I took them out of the packaging was how different the pens are to the original Flexmarkers. So I'm just going to grab you one here. So you can see instantly just how different kind of the barrels are. The new Brushmarkers, they look just like kind of the Pro markers. It's like you'd have trouble like distinguishing them if they were all like in a pot, I think, and that I think there's you could accidentally grab like the wrong colour, especially if you have both Pro markers and brush markers. So I don't like the fact that the brush markers are identical to the Pro markers now. But yeah, the other noticeable thing that I actually quite like was they now have the colour name on the base. Oh, and it also says brush, so I guess that would help with distinguishing from the Pro marker ones. But yeah, whereas the original ones, they never did. I had to kind of write the names and the colours on myself. So yeah, the next noticeable thing will be actually the brush. So the original brush, it looks like this. It was quite a short brush. There was like a nice chunky thing you could hold, so you had good control of the brush in the original Flexmarker. The new Brushmarker is noticeably different. The brush is much longer, and there isn't actually a very comfortable way of holding the pen because of this. If you want like good control of it, you're going to want to hold it lower down like you did with the original Flexmarkers, but you can't really do that with the new one. So you can kind of see side by side they're a completely different shape. They're much different feeling as well. They feel nothing like the original Flexmarkers at all. So if you were attached to the original Flexmarkers, you're going to have a hard time adjusting, I think, to the new Brushmarkers, just because they have such a different feel to them. Kind of in appearance, the new Brushmarkers actually look similar to the old Trier markers that Letraset used to do, which were also discontinued. So if I put them there, you can see the brushes look much more similar kind of in appearance than it does to like the old Flexmarker. So it looks much more like the Trio one than the Flexmarker one. I'd say it even slightly looks a bit like a Copic one as well, because the original Flexmarker had a very distinguished kind of pattern to the brush, which actually these Flexmarkers, they were notorious for getting damaged. A brand new pen would get sent to you directly from Letraset and it would already be completely smushed up on the end somehow. So they had very, very bad quality control back in the day on the Flexmarker pens. I can't say at all what the quality control would be like on the new Brushmarkers because I only have the set of 6 that I bought just to compare. But every single one was fine. They all looked the same. They all felt the same. So I'd say off the bat that they have probably upgraded the kind of quality compared to like the original Flexmarkers. But just to like remind myself kind of what they felt like, because it was a while ago that I tested them. So I'd say the original Tria marker was probably, definitely without a doubt, the firmest of all the brushes. It almost didn't feel like a brush. It was just having that extra length on it did give it more of a curvy ability to like flex around and get different designs and sharper tips to it. So I'd say the new brush marker is definitely much softer than that original Tria marker, but I don't think it's similar to the original Flexmarker. It's actually, it feels slightly softer than the original Flexmarker, just because it's, ironically, the Winsor & Newton brush marker is much more flexible than the original Flexmarker. So it was odd that they kind of changed the name really, when actually the nibs are a lot more flexible and you can get much more curvy action and actually much more fine strokey details as well. So if you're doing fur, you can get much like sharper points on it than you could with the original Flexmarker. Because that was also a problem with the original Flexmarker, is after you started using it a bit, this one's barely been used, but already like the tip instantly goes sort of frayed slightly, and the more you used it, the more kind of soft and frayed the tip would get in the original Flexmarkers. So quickly comparing again, yeah, I'd say the brush marker it's an odd texture. Like it feels soft, but then you kind of, the tip is soft, but then you get some firmness in there, whereas the Flexmarker kind of feels the same all the way through. And then comparing it to a Copic marker, I'd say the Copic marker feels more like the original Flexmarker than it does the new brush pen. Yeah, the new brush pen is just insanely soft in comparison to the Copic one. So yeah, anyway, that was my little comparison of like all the new nibs on the new pens. I did do a larger picture just to kind of test out, like doing a whole picture of what it would be like just using these pens. So this was what I kind of did just to test it out. I did end up mixing other Flexmarkers and Copic markers into the picture as well. But I thought it was sort of interesting that the new brush markers, they actually didn't seem to lay down colour quite as well as the original Flexmarkers. When I was kind of just filling in large areas of her skin, it kind of felt a little bit streaky. I went over it quite a few times, but I'm not sure if it will show up, but it still kind of felt, you can kind of see over here, it left kind of streaky marks. It didn't want to lay down the colour perfectly flat, which I don't remember ever having a problem with that with the original Flexmarkers. So yeah, I'm not sure. I think just because I'm a creature of habit, I still prefer the Flex markers, just because I've used them for so long and I've had so many and I'm kind of used to the way they work. I think it would take a while to get used to the feel of these brush markers, just because they are so long, like the nibs are so long that it's an odd way to try and control something that feels really long and really flexible. You're basically having to kind of hold it higher up as well, because that isn't very comfortable. You can't really hold it lower down to get detailed control. So yeah, so as final thoughts go, I think they're cheaper than Copics and they still have a good colour range. One thing that did annoy the crud out of me when I was working on this picture was, you can look at these colours, like on the barrels, these colours look so similar. So it was so easy to kind of grab the wrong colour, because the names are ridiculously tiny. Like the names are just like, and then you get all the other language of the names as well, and you've got to kind of search for this tiny little name. whereas the original Flexmarkers, it was, you know, it was in a nice big black box, so you didn't have to kind of search the whole pen to kind of look for the name, because it was right there in your face and you could easily grab the right colour, whereas these ones, you're kind of searching for little white or black text, and it just seemed confusing and a pain, and I kept picking up the wrong colour. So that's something I don't like. I think they need like a much bigger, bolder colour name on there, like the Flexmarkers did with that little box. Yeah, anyway, that was my thoughts on that. That was something that drove me crazy when I was trying to do this picture, just to test them out. So yeah, those were my thoughts on the new brush markers from Winsor & Newton compared to the original Flexmarkers from Letraset. I think it's very odd that they didn't continue with the colours that were in the original Flexmarker set. I understand why they would want to upgrade to the brush marker, just because probably of that quality control issue I mentioned where the nibs got damaged so easily, but I do wish they'd made it like really noticeable, the difference between the pens. Like with the Copic ones, the ones that had that bullet nib, they had like a square top on them so that you could see the difference, and the same with like the chows are noticeably different because they're round and they had different coloured like lids on them. I kind of wish that Winsor & Newton had been more creative with the style of the brush marker, so that it wasn't so similar with the Pro marker. Yeah, but I think, to be honest, they're a good buy because again, they're cheap. If you want a good brush marker to blend stuff, then they blend really well because they're flexible, and you can get both detailed points and you can get big kind of strokey lines. So yeah, you can see I got kind of quite fine little points on this kind of fluffy stuff. I didn't do that much detail just because I got bored, but yeah, you can easily get like really fine details, and yeah, so I think they're a good buy if you want a cheap brush marker and you don't want to pay the insane Copic prices, but they are very noticeably different. Also, ink is very different between the Winsor & Newton / Letraset and of course Copic. The ink is very, very different. Copic ink is a lot more grainy, so if you've never used anything but Copic ink, then you might find them maybe not to your taste, because they are much more juicy, the ink that you get from Pro markers and brush markers. So you can lay down much larger blocks of colour with these kind of pens than you can with Copic ones. So yeah, if you want a cheap alternative, that might be up your alley. But if you're a fan of the old Letraset ones, you're probably not gonna like them as much, or you might like them more. It's just I might be overly biased because of my love for the old Flexmarker and the old brand, and having such faithful companions for so many years in my art. So, but yeah, I think they would work. I would probably eventually switch over, perhaps when my Flexmarkers eventually run out, but I don't know. I kind of also like the Copic ones because the Copic pens are refillable, so that kind of has that to their advantage. So I'm not sure if I would completely switch over to the brush markers. I would definitely continue on with Pro markers when all my old Letraset Pro markers die. Like with this black one, which was almost dead, I switched over to the Winsor & Newton one just because they're exactly the same, and I'm quite fond of the old Pro markers, especially if you want to do like little kind of detailed work that you want the bullet nib for. So yeah, definitely sticking with my old Pro marker, no matter what company takes it over. I'll still be using my Pro markers, but I'm not 100% sold on the brush markers. I think there was definitely some room for improvement, I think, on the way they design them. I think perhaps more thought should have gone into the design kind of process of the brush markers. But there you go. Anyway, that was my kind of sort of comparison mini review, my thoughts and feelings on the new pens versus the old pens. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video useful or enjoyed it or helpful in deciding if you wanted to try the new brush markers for yourself or stick with the old ones. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys all soon. Bye!